Hey there, welcome to today's episode of Tableau in 2 minutes. Today, I'm going to walk you through 3 ways to do time series analysis in Tableau. So I went ahead and connected to this border crossing entry data in Tableau. We have almost 400,000 rows of data, but the thing that we're really interested in is this date column and also all of these different measures and ports and states that we can use to slice this data and understand from a time perspective what's been happening with it. So let's go ahead and jump into our first worksheet. Now, before we can start visualizing anything from a time series perspective, we're going to have to go ahead and take care of our date field. If we drop that on our rows shelf here, you can see that we only have this month year format for our date, and Tableau doesn't recognize that as a date. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just create ourselves a new calculated field. I'm going to call it date underscore date. And then we're going to use the date pass function. So date pass right here. We're going to give it the format, which is month, 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 year, 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 year. Then we're going to tell it the field. There is documentation for this function online where you can come up with these different formats for dates on your own on the Tableau website. So I would suggest looking that up. This is a really useful function for turning strings into dates where you have an unusual format or it's a format that Tableau doesn't recognize. So let's go ahead and take this date format, drag it out onto the row shelf. All right, there we go. This is behaving as a date and we are getting the information that we expect. Excellent. So I'm going to just get rid of that real quick. I'm going to take the value. This is the number of people that cross the border at any one of our checkpoints. You can see that over the time that we have about 11 billion people, just over 11 billion people who've crossed the border. That's a lot of people. And then we're just going to take our date out. We're going to drag it out onto our columns shelf. We dragged value out onto the row shelf, and you can see just like that, we've already created ourselves a time series line chart, which is awesome. This shows us the annual trends. You can see the up and downs really easily over this whole time frame. Obviously, there's a general trend, which is downwards, and if we want to, we can go ahead and add ourselves a trend line to this just by clicking on Analytics up at the top, going to the trend line, dragging out the trend line. So that shows us that the general trend is downwards. A couple of things that we just want to be aware of. Obviously, we don't have complete data for 2024 yet. And we start off kind of high here in the late starts in 1996. So maybe want to take care of that and cut some of these ends off this chart as we look through this analysis. But for the moment, we'll leave everything on there. The other thing that we can do with this data when it's visualized in this type of a format is we can take a forecast, we can drag a forecast out, which will add a forecast onto the end of our line. Now, Tableau uses something called an exponential smoothing model, which captures seasonality, and it weighs the recent trends more heavily. But in the case of this data, it's really not doing a particularly good job of what we would expect to happen. That might be because there's some unusual drops and things in the data with, obviously 2020 and the COVID pandemic and things like that. So the forecast's not working very well in this particular case, but we do have that as a way to extend out the line charts that we have for visualizing time series data. Now, this is a pretty normal way. I'm sure you've seen this before, really the standard way of visualizing time series data. But what if we want to take out some of the noise that's caused by these up and downs? Well, then we can use something called a slope chart. So I'm going to take us to a new sheet. This one we're going to build our slope chart. So we'll take our date. I'm going to start off with just a line chart. So I need my value here. Right, so this is very similar to last time. And all we're going to do is we're going to move our year right here. I'm just going to drag this down and move it out onto the filter shelf. So I'm going to take the date, drop it back on the filter shelf. I'm going to select years. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first year. And then we're not going to select 2024 because that wasn't a full year. But we are going to select 2023. And then we're going to take out all of these years in the middle. We're going to uncheck. Now, the easiest way to do this, I could go through and uncheck them. The easiest way to do it is just to click none, select the year that we want to start with, which is 1996, the year that we want to end with, which is 2023. Hit OK. Okay, now we have a graph that shows us the start and the end point. So if we go back to our time series line, we're just showing this point, the very first point, and then we're dragging it all the way out to this point, the end point. Now, not particularly interesting when we look at it just like this. Where it gets really interesting is if we add in some of the other details. So let's say that we add in port name. There we go. We can drag this out onto the color shelf. Just going to add all members for now. It does get a bit messy. And you can see that between 1996 and 2023, there were some pretty significant changes in terms of which ports, which border entry points showed the most. And this is where this becomes interesting. If we tried to visualize this level of information on the line chart, it would be hard to see what had moved up and what had moved down. But by having just the first and just the last point, it gives us a much clearer point of how some of these things have changed over the entire period that we're looking at. And obviously we can go into our filter here. We can change the date. So if we don't want to start in 1996, we want to start in 2010, we just have to change our start date. And then obviously that changes these lines too. So let's go ahead and go back to, I really like the way it looked with 1996 on there. We'll take out 2010. Now, one of the other things we can do to sort of enhance this, right, is because it looks a bit bare with just the lines moving up and down, is we can actually add value again. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this a dual axis chart. So I'm going to change this chart type down here to, I'm going to go to my second, so this is my second chart. I'm going to change it to show circles. Oh, they're pretty big. We're going to make those a bit smaller. Quite a lot smaller, in fact. There we go. Whoop, maybe a bit too small. There we go. That's a good size. And then we are going to make this a dual axis chart. So I'm going to click on dual axis. You'll note that the dots don't line up because they never line up to start with. We're going to hit synchronize axis, and there you'll see we have this nice view with a big dot at the start and a big dot at the end. It shows us nice and clearly where each of these lines terminate and where they start. You could also add some text to this. You could take off, obviously there's a lot of noise right down in this area, so not a great visualization as it stands, but a great way of visualizing time series data. Let's take a look at one more method. This last method is a cycle plot. What this is going to do is this is going to show us the trends month by month, the seasonality that we see for every year sort of aggregated out. So what we want to do, so we're going to take our date, we're going to drag our date out here so that we get all our dates. We're going to expand this out so that we have the year and the month, and then we're going to reverse these. So I'm going to take my month and I'm going to put it before my year. Then I'm going to take our value, I'm going to drop that out there. And what you'll see is we get this series of line charts. Now, for this one, I'm actually going to take out 2020 and a couple of other years too, because they get in the way a bit in this particular chart type. So let's go ahead and take out 2024. Actually, let's take out everything after 2019. That'll make it nice and clear. Okay, so now we have 1996 to 2019. We have the trends by year, which is obviously the same trend that we were looking at earlier on. But if we squash this down, we can really squeeze these, go into our analytics tab and add an average. And we want to add it to each of the panes. So this is going to add us one for each month. And you can see by looking at where the averages fall that we're typically a bit lower in January and February, steady from March through June, higher in July and August, and then back down to a similar level to March through June for September through December. Within this, you can also obviously see the trends year to year. So even though the shape of this is the same when we look across all of the years, you can see that the overall graph moves up and down in different months to show you the seasonality of these border crossings. There's another way that we can do this too that might make it a bit clearer and allow us to see the differences between these different years. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a new sheet, sheet 4. I'm going to drag our date out. Whoops, I'm not going to drag that date out. That's the wrong date. I'm going to drag this date out, expand it out again, take out quarter, and then reverse it so that we have our months over our years. Beginning to build out the same sort of thing. You can see that we have the same piece here. as we did in the other one. But in this case, I'm going to take year and I'm just going to drop it onto my color shelf right here. Now, you can see a couple of funky things going on, right? So let's go ahead and just grab our date, filter out some of the years we didn't like the look of before, right? So we'll get rid of everything after 2019. And you can see that we also have this seasonality. So we're higher in July and August, similar levels, sort of September to December and March to June, and then lower in January and February. We can see that pattern, and we can see how this moves up and down year by year. So depending on the year, some years might be higher, some years might be lower. But overall, this shape is the same in terms of seasonality. If we wanted to, we can take the year right off there. We can just visualize it by month. That also shows us the seasonality, but this doesn't show us the range that we have, like how much variation there is year by year in this particular value. So there you go. There's 3 different ways to visualize time series data. We started off with a traditional line chart where you can see the trend over time and sort of extrapolate that out into the future. We also looked at a slope chart, which really focuses on the difference between the first and the last point. So you can see what's moved up and what's moved down the most in relation to each other when you're visualizing different categories within a time series. And then finally, we looked at a cycle plot, which really helps pick out seasonality and even shows you within that seasonality which years have been higher and which years have been lower. Hey, if you did enjoy this video, then please do like and subscribe to the channel. We talk about Tableau, we talk about data analysis, we talk about Power BI, and we also give you tips on communicating better with data. I look forward to seeing you next time.